Hi everyone, welcome to Gender and Communication. My name is Dr. Desrayaux, but you can call me Dr. D. Today in this video, I wanted to define some really core concepts to this course, sex and gender. I'm going to be using these terms throughout the semester, so I wanted to make sure that you understood what they meant. When I say sex, I'm talking about biology. I'm talking about hormones, chromosomes, physiology, all of those aspects that are really based in biology. Typically, when we talk about sex, we're talking about males and females, although there's actually quite a bit of variation, even based exclusively on biology. We'll talk about that later in the semester. If sex is about being male or female, then what's gender? Well, gender is what we call a social construction. It's an idea about what it means to be male or female. In other words, it's about masculinity and femininity. Now, these are really expectations that come from our culture and our society about what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to behave, how we're supposed to communicate, who we're supposed to be based on our sex. But it's not necessarily linked to sex. It's linked to the expectations based on sex. But you can absolutely have different biology than identity. So we're going to be talking about gender in terms of masculinity and femininity. But we're also going to talk about gender in terms of androgyny, and later on in the semester, we're going to talk about a whole slew of other options that gets even more complicated with gender than it does with sex. I want to talk to you quickly about a scholar called Sandra Bem, who came up with the sex roles inventory in the 1970s. She thought that gender and sex were indeed different, but she also wondered if masculinity and femininity were actually two sides of the same dimension, or if they were independent from one another, so that you could be both masculine and feminine at the same time. That's what she argued. And so she created an inventory to measure masculinity, to measure femininity, and to make sure that when she measured those, she measured them independently. So when you complete the sex role inventory, you'll actually be completing a more modern one rather than the 1970s version, because ideas of gender have certainly changed, as has our culture. But what you're going to be getting scores in is how masculine you are and how feminine you are. But there's also kind of this third option, which is androgynous. And Bem argued that the most ideal gender is really to score high in both masculinity and femininity. Now, this idea that androgyny is best is not necessarily something that we have evidence for. It was Bem's idea, but it is definitely an option. You can be high in masculinity and high in femininity. You can also be low in masculinity and low in femininity, where you just really don't associate with either of those traditional genders. And Bem called that undifferentiated. So that's the survey that you'll be completing, is a more kind of modern take on this measure of masculinity and femininity. It's a measure of your gender, or at least what we're going to call gender for these first few weeks of the semester. We're going to complicate that term later on as we delve a little bit deeper into the complexities of gender, gender identity, gender expression, and so forth.